Good day to you. This is Anagalactic on the 16th day of May. This is our second video today. The first one was produced at dawn of this lovely windy Saturday, and now it is sunset. I promised to give this continuation to the prior video, which was about 45 minutes long. You are in no need of going back to see that if you haven't seen it, although you may wish to if something that I say does not quite make sense to you. It will if you view the previous video. The reason I have a rather long video as I did before is I have learned to do this in twos so that on the second video it won't be necessary to go into details on definitions. We covered the definition of religion, the definition of science, and superposition, the fact that human beings have two subsystems which completely define a human, and we introduced my main topic, which as a scientist is of course a science topic. The little inset window you see up here is from the Quran, and we're just going to begin with this very brief reading, which is really only one sentence long, but it's quite significant, as many of the ayah are. That's a verse. Ayah is Arabic for verse. I'm trying to pick up on Arabic words one by one. I've only known about the Quran for about a year and a half, is all. Which there's a story behind that. I'm not too really proud of that on behalf of my culture, nation, and society, but it's really partly my own fault. I just never got around to reading the Quran. And now that I have, I'm quite devoted to that book as the final prophecy in the entire prophetic sequence, which we're going to talk about briefly today. And the reason I gave those definitions for religion and science and the two sides of a human, one of which is rational logic, and the conjugal relationship between those two sides, which is emotion and logic, which can be translated to science and religion. The book that I have been giving video presentations on for well over a month, Al-Ghazali, actually several months, is a book devoted to the union of science and religion. And it's high time that somebody tried to do such a thing. There have been men in the European tradition of Catholicism, all the way to Luther, who have attempted to systematize a certain sectarian point of view on religion. Islam is not like that. It does have a tradition side because that's part of human culture. And all religions develop a tradition because a religion based on a transmission, such as, of course, the Quran is a transmission from heaven, but so is the Bible. Quite a few dozen books in that compendium of books compiled over the centuries and millennia to comprise what is considered now to be the basis of at least one religion, unless you want to consider Christianity to be separate, which most people do. But Judaism is a dead religion. It doesn't actually exist. It has been kept alive culturally because the Jews, when they were kicked out of Israel 2,000 years ago, they kept their culture. They could not keep their religion. But of course, some of them believe that they've also kept their religion, and that's perfectly fine. I'm just saying, as a scientist, they're out of their minds. They don't have a religion. They say they do, I say they don't. And we're just going to have to disagree, but I'm the expert. But they're the humans. And I prefer to give credit to the humans. If you say you're gay, you're gay. And I have nothing to comment about that. Goody for you. That's fine. If you're atheist, hey, you're a free man. You're an atheist. But I'll tell you what you are if you ask me. But only, you see, in science, you do have to defend the truth. But there are two kinds of truth. And only two kinds of truth. I discovered these dualities. It's really my system of approach, and it's kind of an exaggeration to say that I discovered something. I discovered it for myself. That when you're talking about a human, you're talking about two merged people, because we're two systems. One is completely emotional, which includes love, And of course, that goes to morality. Morality is based on love. I don't know if you've ever thought deeply about that, but that's a very good topic for the philosophy room. And I would defend all morality is based on an original perception of love. Why? Because there's no meaning behind reality unless love is involved somewhere. And that's where it gets religious. Religion is the emotional side of a human. Actually, that's not quite accurate. That's only half the story. It's also scientific. And if your religion is not based in absolute rational logic, you have a vain and actually a false religion, because it doesn't make sense to you. You can say that it makes sense to you, but you better be careful what you say. Because when you're talking about supernaturality, things which humans cannot see, but you say you are perfectly aware of what others cannot see. Well, Richard Dawkins will have you for lunch. He will roast you and eat you alive. And so will I. The most important aspect of modern religion, by everyone's account, everybody is in full agreement on the main issue in religion today, which has been true for 2,000 years. Well, it's been true for 1,200 years, ever since Muhammad received a transmission from an angel named Gabriel. And he never wrote it down. He did not write the Quran. His friends did. Just as Yeshua never wrote anything. His followers did. And the Islam people simply do not trust that account, because it's been through the hands of the Jews, who are known to corrupt everything they touch, including the Bible. That's quite a delicate issue in a lot of circles. I inhabit those circles. It took me decades to get enough evidence to convince myself that the Holy Scriptures are not holy at all, because they've been in the hands of the Israelis too long. Those bastards changed everything. They left out a whole book, for one thing, called the Book of Enoch. I discovered that last year for myself. That has been surmised. I could prove it. The Book of Enoch should be in the Tanakh. Why isn't it? Because of the Levites. This is why God destroyed that evil nation. All the Israelis are gone. There are no Israelis left in the whole world. So what are those white people doing in the old nation of Israel? I will be telling you exactly why today, because this is what I promised in the prior video. It was to lead to a full, absolute, open, above board, final solution. Pardon the expression, final solution. What is going on? What is going on right now? I think you know there is a rather strange situation going on around the nation of Iran. Well, that's an Islam nation, just so you know, that's an Islam nation. It's actually a rather peculiar Islam nation. It's the oldest culture on earth, bar none. There could be a tie. Some people say India, China, Egypt. No, not true. The oldest culture on earth is on the Iranian plateau. And you may be able to guess why. That's where humanity spread out from. Okay? So we're talking about natural history, the history of the human race on earth. How do we know anything about the history of the human race on earth? I'll be talking about that right now in this video. But what we're getting at is, why is the United States attacking Iran? It's on the other side of the world. I'm a military expert. And when I was evaluating the Vietnam War as I was entering high school, I was appalled. Because by the time I was 14 years old, I knew everything there was to know about World War II in both theaters. I read hundreds of books on World War II by the time I was a sophomore in high school. And I wrote a couple of papers that got very good grades, A+ on both of them. One in junior high and one in high school. On what the United States was going to be doing now that World War II is over and the United States is the only superpower on earth. No longer true. Now China is ahead of the United States. Now you may have been following this war. It is an undeclared war. It's an illegal war. Congress didn't approve this war. It was unilaterally initiated by, and I think you know what initiated it. It's been going on for decades. Iran has been under continuous attack since the end of World War I. Continuous attack. It's always been being strangled. First, the British tried to take over the nation, and they actually succeeded for a while in owning all the oil in Iran because they're whites. They're rapacious. The English government is one of the filthy, dirtiest nations that's ever existed. They wanted that oil, and British Petroleum finally got it. And they murdered whoever they needed to murder to get it. And then Dr. Mossadegh in 1953 was assassinated by a combination of CIA and I suppose it was MI5 at the time, murdered him. Murdered him. One of the greatest, a greater man than John F. Kennedy, a greater man than Abraham Lincoln, far greater. And then a series of CIA imposed and British supported fake governments were installed in Iran. That was finally overthrown in 1979, and you may remember that story if you're at least as old as I am. But you're probably too young to know anything about that. You probably don't know a goddamn thing about Iran. And most Americans don't even know where it is. But if you've been following this war, it's been going on it's coming up on 2 months. That's quite inaccurate. It's been going on for decades. It's been going on for decades. And the United States wants to strangle Iran to get its oil. I predicted that in 1970. That doesn't mean I'm a prophet. It means I know my onions. So what's going on? The same old, same old. Not quite. Not anymore. Not since 1948. There is another adjunct to the United States. Actually, two. One is called Israel, which is a lie. There's no such thing as Israel. I just proved that to you. Israel does not exist, either as a land, or as a people, or as a religion. They're gone forever. But among the tribe, the last of the Israeli tribes, the Yehudi, who are the only tribe left when Yeshua was born, went through his ministry, and ascended to heaven after being dealt with quite harshly by the very last of the Yehudi, after which there were none, because God destroyed them all. He kicked them out of the land according to the Mosaic curse. That's according to the Yehudi themselves. These are the ones called the JEWs, okay? That's a lie. There are no such thing as Yehudins. They're Europeans now. There are certain Yehudins left in all the way from Morocco and Algeria, all the way to Ethiopia. There are some in Saudi Arabia. There are some in India who are actually Semitic Yehudins, because they stayed in the same band, and they're all brown. The Yehudins are brown. All the Israelis are brown. They're not white, they're brown. They're all brown. So what are those white people doing there? Are they actually Jews? Yeshua HaMashiach says that they're not Jews. He says that in the book of Revelation. And that's what we're going to get into today. That's the book that Islam is not allowed to know about, and none of them do. I checked. And I'm an extremely good researcher. I'm not saying this I myself am Muslim. So I'm very curious how my family, which has been around for 1,400 years now, how come they don't know anything about the book of Revelation? Because it's a Jewish book. It's a Jewish book. They don't trust the Jews. They have no reason to trust the Jews. They also don't trust the Christians. For very good reason. The Jews are not Jews. The Christians are not Christians. Are the Islam people Islam? Yes, they are. And what's Islam? We covered that, but you may want to do a study on your own. Just what exactly is Islam? I'll tell you so that you have the best answer, so that you have choices. Maybe you have no idea what Islam is. It's called the way of heaven. That's the correct term. Islam means the way of heaven, the way of salvation, the path to God. That's what it means. So that's the only religion that's ever been. What makes it peculiar? Prophecy. Hinduism doesn't have prophecy. Buddhism doesn't have prophecy. Confucius, who basically wrote the I Ching, or he compiled it, he put his stamp of approval on the I Ching. I consider that to be a holy book. It is. But is it prophecy? No. In the Vedas and Gitas, is there prophecy? No. They know nothing about prophecy. Does Islam? They know all the prophets. It's just they have them categorized according to reliability. And anything that's been in the hands of the Jews, absolutely not. They will consider it, and they will approve what's approvable, because they believe that Allah has sent prophets to every culture at every phase of history. I agree. I believe that that can be proved. My gig at my advanced old age, having studied science and religion all my life, really science more in the last 20 years, but religion in the first 30 to 40 years. I know virtually everything there is to know about the Bible. We're going to talk about that. But I'm going to have a very brief reading from the Quran. I want you to see this. To get us started, I'm going to tell you what the world situation is. And no one else knows. Only I know. Because I'm a wise man, because I've read prophecy and studied my whole life to figure out what it means. We appointed not the vision which we showed you, but as a test for mankind. You know who said that? Gabriel the angel. Technically, Gabriel the Archangelos. One of the holiest of all angels, one of the four that guard the throne of heaven. Who knows that? Quite a few prophets know about that. Does Mohammed? Yes, he does. He was taken to heaven too, just as Yohan was, who wrote the Book of Revelation on behalf of the risen Lord Yeshua. I say Lord Yeshua because that means master. He is my master. Is he God? No. Of course he's not God. That's what the Catholics say. What about the Protestants? They say exactly the same thing. Well, they're wrong. So there's no such thing as Christianity. Is that an overstatement? Of course it is. There's also no such thing as the people of God who are Yehudi. I would not say that ever. But statistically, there's no such thing as Christianity anywhere. What do you mean, the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints? Have you ever looked at their Book of Mormon? They're hilarious. They're so pathetic it's actually rude. Unless you just love a good joke. Well, they take themselves quite seriously, don't they, the Mormons? Well, they're out of their fucking minds. They're stark staring mad. The Seventh-day Adventists, who I hung with for 15 years. I know, but I was young. Why did I hang with them? Because I don't give a shit about dogma or doctrine. I just ignore it. I like hanging with people who talk about the Bible in a rational way. They're rational up to a certain point until you start getting into their doctrine and dogma, in which case they have a prophetess. Ellen G. White was a bona fide prophetess, was she? She was a false prophetess if she was. And this is typical. What about the Methodists? They say Jesus is God. What about the Baptists? Jesus is God. What about the Catholics? Jesus is God. What does the true religion say? What did Yeshua say? Did he say that he was God? What do you think? You answer that question. Did Yeshua ever say he was God? Yes or no? Your life depends on it in some contexts. You had better say no. He did not say that. Because he's not God. And that's why Islam rejects Christianity. For the same reasons I reject it. Does that mean I'm not a Christian? By that definition, yeah. But am I a follower of Yeshua? So was Muhammad. So am I. Yes, but as for being a Christian, you might confuse me with a Methodist, a Lutheran, a Presbyterian, a Seventh-day Adventist, a Mormon, a Jehovah's Witness. They're stark staring mad, every single one of them. 1,000 sects in America that all say that Jesus is God. No, he's not. So where are the Christians? They're in Iran. They're in Saudi Arabia. They're in the Gaza Strip. There are 2 billion Christians that do believe Yeshua was a prophet, but will never say that he was God because he's not God. So who's attacking whom? Who's attacking whom? The white people are attacking the brown people. Is that fair? I would say that's a stretch. How about the Europeans, including the Americans, who just happen to all 100% be white? None of them are brown. Are any of them Islam? None of them are. No white person is Islam in politics or in religion. If there is such a thing as a Christian in the West, such as myself, who's a convert to Islam, it's because I was picked out by heaven for salvation, to rescue me from these idiots. I spent decades among these creeps, Protestants. Protestants are not Christians. You know what they protested? The Catholic Church raping the money out of everybody for 1,000 years. That's what Luther was dead set against. Stop extorting money from the people of God. And then he said there's only one rule of faith, and it doesn't depend on money. It depends on faith. Not money. Not indulgences. Not taxes. Not tithes. That's not religion. That's the Catholic Church. And what's the basis of their false religion? How do they get away with this? Jesus is God. Jesus is God. No no rational person would say that. He never said it. Nobody ever said it in Holy Scripture. Nobody ever said Jesus was God. Because obviously he's not. You know why not? This is where we start to get into the nitty-gritty. Have you ever heard the term a spirit? Okay, here's a test question, or quiz, because I got to give you the answer. But test yourself. Do you know the difference between a spirit and an angel? If you don't be ashamed. You were raised in the fucking West. How the hell would you know that? Every Islam person knows that. They could tell you instantly the difference between an angel and a spirit. Of course, people are different. They have different levels of education, so that's an overstatement. But statistically, no Christian knows the answer to that, so-called Christian, but every Islam person does. What's the difference between a spirit and an angel? Let me ask you this. In Islam and in Christianity, of what nature is God? Do you know the right answer? Is he angelic? No. Why not? Because angels have bodies. They're corporeal beings. What about a spirit? It has no body. A spirit has no body. Jesus said, that is Yeshua, that is Isa, the Arabian term for Yeshua. Isa said, God is a spirit. So that's the right answer. So what's an angel? It's an order of beings that are created by Allah. Or you could say the Lord God, if you use the Tanakh, the Tanakhian term. That is the traditional Israeli, you could say Christian transmission. They're the same thing because of the prophets. So there were several Israeli prophets. Do you know who the first one was? Nobody does. Except I do. So who was the first Israeli prophet? That's a trick question. You know why? Because that prophet would have to be Israeli. Well, when did the Israelis come into existence? Just 2 generations after Abraham was the birth of Jacob, who was renamed Israel. That's the beginning of the Israeli tribes. And then Israel had sons who I think a lot of people can name all 12 tribes, but you got to be cautious because it kind of changed. Yeah, the whole thing is pretty hokum when you say that there are 12 tribes. Well, in the book of Revelation, it talks about the 12 tribes again. But when the book of Revelation was written, there was only 1 tribe. So what's the book of Revelation doing if there are not 12 tribes, and yet in two lists in Revelation, it lists all 12 tribes being rewarded in the future? So what does that mean? We're going to get into that as we get into the book of Revelation. Don't be scared. I'm the world's foremost authority on that book, by far. I completely understand it, but I did not understand it completely until 2025. I've been trying to understand that book for 50 years. I do understand the rest of prophecy. There are things in Obadiah and certain places like Habakkuk, they're just mind-blowing. I'm not sure anybody understands those things completely. I wouldn't say I understand everything in the Israeli prophecies. But what was the last one? That's the one I would like to test you with. What was the last Israeli prophecy? Do you know? It was issued by a man named Yohan, which is John. Which John? There are 4 in the New Testament. The last one, John of Patmos. And he is the one who wrote the book of Revelation. Now you may know that there was exactly one prophet after John, but he wasn't Israeli. John was actually of the last generation of any Israelis, which were the Yehudans, who were in process of being kicked out of their country. John actually had been kicked out. All the Jews were kicked out by the Romans. Right after they murdered Yeshua, within just a few decades, Titus came in and destroyed their temple and kicked him out. And that was a fulfillment of the Mosaic prophecy, which the Jews always ignored. You could say Jews, but for the longest time it was 12 tribes, until God got sick of them. After the split, they had a civil war, and 11 of the tribes, some say 10, were in the north. 10 different tribes, 10 different little nations. But they were allied, like the north was. Those states banded together to fight the south in the United States. Well, in Israel, it was the other way around. The winner was basically Judah in the south, and God arranged that because Yeshua was already prophesied to be born of the tribe of Judah. The Lion of the tribe of Judah. That's genuine. Even the Jews couldn't change that. That was prophesied long before there was such a thing as a Jew. Now today there are people in the land of Israel, which is misnamed, who call themselves Jews. They are liars. Who says that? Well, I do as a scientist, because genetically they're not Jews. They certainly aren't Semitic. They've been in Europe for 2,000 years. They've turned white. They're not even brown. So they're not Semites. There's no such thing as anti-Semitism. Hitler was not an anti-Semite. But the Americans are anti-Semitic because there are Semites. They're called the Islam people, the people of Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Libya. I could go on. They're all Semitic, which means descended from Shem, just so you know. What about the Jews? They're not Jews. Those people who are in Israel, they're all white. They're all white. They're Europeans. They're not Jews. Who else said that besides myself as a reputable scientist? Yeshua did. The risen Yeshua said that from heaven. He said it twice in the letters. There are 7 letters written to the 7 ecclesia proving that there are actually Christians, but they don't have a church. Any Christian church that has a name is not a Christian church. But there are Christians who form groups. And they had better be very cautious, because they are a hunted species. If you're a true Christian, the American Christians don't like you. Although Americans typically have been forgiving, and now nobody gives a hoot, because mostly everything's gone to atheism now, at least on public media. Americans are atheists. By choice. Because they're stupid. America is a nation of retarded people, and I could say much worse. What about the Islam people? In Iran, they're the most cultured, wonderful people who have ever lived. And they've been an example of pure culture for over 1,000 years. What about the Christians? The sewer of Europe. The most despicable, every bad idea that's ever come out of humanity came out of Europe. Slight overstatement. But now we see the culmination of the entire experiment with white people. All the Nazis were white, weren't they? All the English are white. The English swine who dominated, the sun never set on the British Empire. Empire? Who the hell do they think they are? Well, just as the French thought. Just as the Germans thought, the Italians, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Dutch, anybody who could sail, Sweden, everybody was rapacious, murderers. And now in America, the biggest band of murderers of all time, unless you want to include Israel. Well, that's what all the analysts are talking about now. All the military analysts and the economic analysts of this war, they have absolutely no idea what's going on. And I've heard it all. China's going to do this. This means that with the Strait of Hormuz. Russia is doing this. Everybody's doing something. Always Trump, 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 Trump. And Bibi Netanyahu, Trump, Bibi Netanyahu, Trump. Netanyahu, Bibi, Trump. Every fucking day you see those psychopaths. And these commentators on the Glenn Diesen show, GLENNDIESEN. If you want the facts from the pros, you'll get it straight on the Glenn Diesen show. He produces more than one video a day. I've been following him for about 6 weeks. Unbelievably good. Do any of his guests actually know? None of them know what's going on. Nobody can even guess. But of course, the name of the game on YouTube, guess all you want, because people are tuned in because they don't know either. Well, that's why I tuned in. Well, although I do know. So I'm the only man who knows what's going on in the so-called Middle East. What is Israel doing? What is the United States doing? What is Europe doing? What is Russia doing? And you might throw in China. It's in there too. Well, what do all these players have in common? They're all in the book of Revelation. The last prophecy. Muhammad doesn't count. He wasn't a prophet. He was a witness. Beloved of heaven, peace be upon that man forever. Was he a prophet? You could say yes or you could say no, but I will tell you what Muhammad was. He was an Ismaili prophet. He was an Ishmaelite prophet. That's of the lineage of Abraham. So God chose a new people. They're all Christians. Muhammad is the greatest Christian who's ever lived. But he was under orders from Allah. Don't talk about the Son of God. That's why I'm here. You have to now. Muhammad did fine. He did not transgress. But as for Jesus being the Son of God, you know how that's interpreted as Islam? In Islam, if you say that he's the Son of God, you're saying God has a body. And that's a bozo no-no. God does not have a body. He's a spirit. But angels do have bodies, and so do men. So that's what men and angels have in common. They're created beings. It's just that angels are made out of fire. According to Islam. But humans are made out of clay. And that's why Satan hates us. That's part of the hadith, and that's true. I can verify that. That is one of the two reasons why Satan hates us. He also hates God. Well, where does Satan live? In the United States. He lives in Israel. He lives in Europe. He lives in white people, statistically. He does not live in brown people. Is he an angel or a spirit? Islam says that he's a spirit. In the Holy Scripture, it can be deduced that he's an angel, but I wouldn't press that. I don't know if anybody is quite certain, or as certain as I am, which is ultimately not certain, because I can't cite anybody, and as an Islam person, I should be able to cite somebody who knows the difference, ultimately, between an angel and a spirit, so that you could decide if Satan is an angel or a spirit. Traditionally in Christendom, he's considered an angel. But in Islam, he is known to be a spirit, not an angel. So he's a spirit being. That's quite difficult. That's quite a difficult question, which you cannot possibly answer. You would simply have to believe whatever I say, and I don't like to do that. If what I say is only on my authority, I will give you my opinion. I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether Satan is an angel or a spirit. The opinion is divided, and I can't see any way to decide that, although I could make a case either way. So I know the strength of each argument. Let me ask you this, though. Really, I'm asking myself on your behalf, so you know where my mind is at. Does it really make any difference? It might. And in the book of Revelation, I'll show you where it does make a difference. And it actually decides the issue. So what's really going on that none of the analysts know? They say that Trump is psychotic. He's literally lost his mind. Okay, what else is new? Netanyahu is a psychopathic murderer. That's been said by several commentators. And so what else is new? The Israelis are absolutely out of control. They're rapacious. They're going to kill every brown person in Israel because they have a plan for the Zionist control of the Middle East. All the way to the Euphrates River, by the way. That would be Greater Israel, and all the way to the Nile. And really, I think perhaps they have even bigger plans, but they're a very tiny nation. They don't have very many people at this time. So they haven't been able to invade Iran. So they called on their good friends in America, who are now sending Marines to invade Iran, which is only the natural outcome after having invaded Iraq, which is right on the border of Iran, then invading Afghanistan, which is on the border of Iran on the other side, then invading Iraq again, and now B-1 stealth bombers, just last summer, crossed into Iranian airspace and bombed the shit out of them while Israel launched a vicious attack, mostly against hospitals and civilians, because they're trying to break the will of the Islamic people of Iran. They can't do it. And all the analysts are saying now that the United States has lost and Israel is doomed. I will show you that these commentators, they're just shooting in the dark. They don't actually know what they're talking about. And the only way you can know who is attacking whom and why. Would you say it's the United States, or Israel, or Europe, or all three? Opinion is a bit divided on that. Some say that it's all Bibi Netanyahu's idea. Norman Finkelstein, the foremost authority on the Gaza situation for sure, says that the entire nation, according to their own internal polls, are absolutely genocidally, the entire population is genocidally disposed. They want genocide. That's why they're in Israel, is to murder all the non-Jewish people. It's very difficult to say that as a human because it doesn't sound human. Bingo. Now you're on the right track. If you're talking about Trump, you're retarded. If you're talking about Netanyahu, you're retarded. If you're talking about Israel, what do you mean by that? A government? Okay. Where does that government get its ideas from? Now switch to the United States. Who's attacking Iran? They both are. Why are they attacking Iran? It's a non-hostile nation. 50 years ago, I said it was going to be to get their oil. Not quite true. Although that is involved. Virtually all of the petroleum resources left that are economically viable are in the Gulf region. It is estimated about 50% of the world's supply comes from there. If that's disrupted, which it certainly is now, it will cause a global depression. It won't be this summer, and I can predict that on very good insight. It'll be dragged out. Just like the Ukraine war has been dragged out for what, going on 3 years now? Nothing exciting happens there. Nothing exciting is going to happen in this war either. Not until the global depression hits either this winter, I believe it'll be either this winter or next summer, will be a global depression that will kill tens of millions of people with famine. It's very serious. It already happened once. I don't know if you've studied the Great Depression of the 1930s. That was a worldwide depression that killed millions of people worldwide of starvation. You can look into that. You should if you don't know what you should know about that. I do. I make it my business to know history, because otherwise you can't interpret present history if you don't know past history. So it is partially about the oil, but it's actually a religious war, and that's brought out in prophecy. It's a very ancient war. And now, basically, there are two sides that have always existed. In some contexts, it's called the sons of light and the sons of darkness. That shouldn't surprise you, or even threaten you in any way. You should be able to at least credit that dichotomy. It's in Star Wars. The dark side of the Force and the light side of the Force. There are two forces, one of which hates God and everything having to do with humans. The head of that little band of angels, or there are angels involved, and whether Satan himself is an angel, I say he has to be. But that goes against Islam scholarship. The Islam scholars do not have a corner on scholarship of this nature. They completely disregard the texts of the Old Testament, including Revelation, because it's not the Quran. They can only trust the Quran because only the Quran has not been through the hands of the Jews. It's very serious. So they also do not like to hear anybody say that Jesus is the Son of God, although that is a proper title. That is given in the most ancient prophecy of all, the Book of Enoch, on which I am now the world's foremost expert. This is what I've been doing all my life. So don't think I'm not purposely using bravado, although I might be to get attention, because I need to be heard. I need a platform. I need to speak this to millions of people, is what is going on. What is going on? Well, let's see. The victims are a peaceful nation that don't have any history of warfare, at least for over 2,000 years. Not quite. Under Islam, there was a very quick spread of Islam, but it was mostly bloodless, because as Islam was conveyed to the countries where Islam very quickly came to the Levant, spread through North Africa, went to Central Africa, crossed India into Southeast Asia. They sent emissaries to China. The Chinese welcomed them as good people. Anybody in their right mind knows that Islam is a good culture. It's a culture and a society of 2 billion people worldwide. So how come you don't know anything about it? I have to ask myself, how come until 2025 I knew nothing about that religion? It has to do with propaganda and the suppression of information, which of course goes to conspiracy theory. Darling, that's all out of the closet. There are no more conspiracy theories. There are only conspiracy facts. But nobody goes far enough. None of the analysts can say who is who. They don't know if it's Israel in control. They don't know if it's the American billionaire Jews. They don't know if it's the Zionists. They don't know if it's the American military. They don't know if it's America at all. They don't know who's doing what. But Europe is now firmly in the camp, again, of America. That's just come out within the past week. Actually, it's been surmised for a long time, but now events are showing Europe, which is all the white people, except for Russia. And now Russia is under attack by Europe. That just began this year. Missile attacks on Russia coming from Europe. The latest commentary is the Russians are just about to use a nuclear weapon if they're pushed far enough because they're not going to let happen to them what's happening to the Iranian people. They're not just going to be punched, just ground and pound, just punch until the person's a bloody wreck. They're unconscious. They're just going to keep pounding until that bitch is dead. Until all of them are dead. What kind of a force has that kind of a malign intent? Is it political? No. Is it economic? No. Is it religious? Yes. It's religious. Isn't it? What's the claim of the so-called European Jews to Israel? It's their religious homeland given to them by God. Do you know how insane that is to say? They don't even believe their own prophets. They're all atheists. All of them are. So are Europeans. They're atheists. Anybody who's a member of the Catholic Church is an atheist. They believe in a false God. That's an atheist. Well, it's not actually an atheist. It's an idolater. And America is based entirely on idolatry. I'm not speaking out of class. All of this is out in the open. Your president was not elected by you. You know who re-elected Trump. The billionaire Israelis. They're the Zionists who call the shots. Everybody knows it. Nobody denies it now. That used to be conspiracy theory. Gee, I wonder why. Because only a kook, only a nutcase would say that Israel is possessed by Satan. Darling, that's what all the prophets have always said. Actually, not quite. Only Yeshua said that they're satanically possessed. So, what do you know about angels? What do you know about fallen angels? Probably more than you'd like, and you probably hate the subject. I'm not going to subject you to angelology or demonology. Although it's quite an interesting topic, I must say. But who controls the governments? Do humans? No. Well, then what controls a government? An angel does. Angels control governments. Exclusively. It's never humans. You have to think about that. I trust that you will. So I'm going to begin with a reading from the Quran. This may be the first time you ever heard anything from the Quran. They're broken up into chapters called surah. And this is just one verse called an ayah of a surah. This is the 17th of 114 surah in the Quran. And I will now quote from this book, which is up here. I will expand it so you'll be able to see it just a little bit better. Give me just a moment. All right, I trust you can see that a little bit better. That's the royal we from heaven. We appointed not the vision, that is the vision that Gabriel showed to Muhammad. We appointed not the vision which we showed you, except as a test for mankind. A test for mankind. Well, that's from the Quran. What vision? That's from the surah called the Night Journey, where Muhammad was taken to heaven. He was not the first man who was taken to heaven by angels. There was a man just a few centuries before him called John of Patmos. And now I'm going to introduce you to the last prophecy in the Israeli transmission. It's from Yeshua in heaven. And the correct title of the book is the prophecy of Yeshua. These are the words of Yeshua spoken to John through Yeshua's angel. So Yeshua is in heaven, and Islam accepts that fact. They also say the same thing, that Yeshua is alive and well in heaven. Muhammad met him. Very interesting what Muhammad said. Remember, this is what was shown to him by an angel who is from the very throne of God, the Archangelos Gabriel. If this sounds strange to you, you better start waking up, because this is extremely important so that you have choices. You can reject it, but you should at least know about it. All right, I'm going to go through this quickly because you can do your own research, and I will have notes in the description portion of this video that will show you how you can look this up yourself, but I'll bet you could figure out how to do so. This is entitled, The Elect One in the Book of Enoch and the New Testament. The elect one is a term from the Book of Enoch. So I'm just going to expand this just a little bit. Although you might not be able to see it, I'll be reading from it. And this is what it says. The elect one is Christ in the Book of Enoch. The elect one, along with the Son of Man, are the most significant terms in the Book of Enoch and New Testament used to describe the Christ, that is, the Messiah. The oldest Greek manuscripts of the Gospel of Luke, describing the transfiguration of Christ during his baptism, uses the term the elect one. And so the Gospel of Luke 9:35, there came a voice out of the cloud saying, "This is my Son, the elect one." And then it has a Greek translation, and then a little bit more information. The following are quotes from the Book of Enoch. "On that day mine elect one shall sit on the throne of glory, and shall try their works, and their places of rest shall be innumerable, and their souls shall grow strong within them when they see mine elect one." Now, just for reference, so you know what we're talking about, if you've never heard of the Book of Enoch, Enoch lived before the flood, and he was the very first prophet. Adam was not a prophet in the same sense, because Enoch began the transmission, and he was alive when Adam was alive. So the information that Adam knew about the creation that he got from his God, he told Enoch, who wrote it down, and that's where we get Genesis from, is from Enoch, because Enoch could write. All right, we get that from the Islam people, they would know. "And those who have called upon my glorious name, then will I cause mine elect one to dwell among them, and I will transform the heaven, and make it an eternal blessing and light, and I will transform the earth, and make it a blessing." That's from the Book of Enoch, chapter 45, verses 3 to 5. Now this is the Ethiopian Enoch. And then there are further quotes, and we won't go on because I think you get the idea. However, I would like you to see that there's a quote from John, another quote from Enoch. "In my Father's house are many mansions." You may recognize those are the words of Yeshua. They are also the words of Enoch. And the Book of Enoch talks about a great white throne and him that sat on it, etc. And then the Revelation of John, which we'll be covering, talks about the elect one. The Book of Enoch, here it is, "For the Son of Man," that's a term from Enoch, "is come to seek and save that which was lost." Actually, that's from the Gospel of Luke. The Son of Man, that's a term from Luke. But above is from Enoch, which I will read. "In those days the elect one shall arise, and he shall choose the righteous and holy from among them, for the day has drawn nigh that they should be saved." So this is good news. "And the elect one," this by the way is Yeshua, "and the elect one shall in those days sit on my throne, and his mouth shall pour forth all the secrets of wisdom and counsel. For the Lord of spirits," that's a term from the Quran, "the Lord of spirits hath given them to him, and hath glorified him." And there's more. And I have several videos on the Ethiopic Book of Enoch, which you are invited, if you're interested, to learn from those videos which I've produced. I simply cannot go into such great detail now. Now, rather than give you a lot of quotes from the Book of Revelation, which is not a very long book, but it's quite dense, we have been concentrating on chapter 17, where it talks about Armageddon, which is the next item on the apocalyptic agenda. It's very quickly approaching. And that's where things are leading to. What is the Battle of Armageddon? It is described in Ezekiel and again in Revelation. Two books on which I have written volumes of information. I've been studying those books all my life. So this is a well-known prophecy. It is not well known to the Islam people for the reasons I explained. They are forbidden from dealing with Jewish or Christian writings because they know that they're unreliable. And they're very keen about that, and so am I. However, that does not mean that there was not a bona fide series of prophets. It's just that what was written down that they said is known to be corrupted in several places. And so the Islam people simply won't deal with that. Well, that's really too bad, because that's like throwing out the baby with the bathwater, as that rather horrific cliche goes. So what's actually happening? It's outlined in Revelation. It's been known to all the prophets what happens at the end. But it's Yeshua who said, when he walked this earth, that in those days will be such tribulation as cannot really even be imagined. That is approaching very quickly. You could say, would that involve a nuclear holocaust? There's direct evidence from the book of Ezekiel that yes, Israel's going to be nuked. Why? Because there's no other way to stop them. They can't be stopped. They have to be exterminated, and nuclear weapons will be used. How do we know that? In the book of Ezekiel in chapter 37, it talks about the valley of dry bones, which you may have heard. There's a lot of jingles. Comedians like to make fun of it, as they do Noah, Adam. They make fun of Jesus. They make fun of anything because they're comedians. But when you're talking about the valley of dry bones and you make up songs about it, you're way off the course of Islam. That is a very serious prospect. The book of Ezekiel is known to the Islam people. They won't read it because it was written by the Jews. But they do know who Ezekiel is, and they honor him as a prophet, which is very good. They honor all prophets, but some of them they put very high on the list. Noah. Abraham they consider a prophet, sure. And Moshe, that is Moses, absolutely. They fully accept that. They fully accept the gospel of Yeshua. Fully accept it. What they don't accept is what the Catholics and Protestants say about Jesus, which of course is that he's God, which of course he is not. But what is he? He's the elect one. He's human. And God is a spirit, and humans are human. And so God cannot have a son who is an actual physical descendant, because God doesn't have physical descendants. So why does he say that Yeshua is his son? Because he is his son. Because Allah says so. He designated that man the head of the human race. That's who Yeshua is. He is the representative of all humans in heaven. He's more than that. He's also the king of the earth. That's who he is. That's in the Book of Enoch. It's also in the Book of Revelation, where he is unveiled from heaven. That's the meaning of apocalypsis. It's the tearing aside of a veil, which is, in one construct, a bridal veil. But to tear it aside is violent. It's ambiguous whether it's draw aside, which is gentle, or tear off. But it's the veil between what and what? Between heaven and earth. It's going to be removed. And then men are going to lose their minds. But before they are forced to lose their minds, which will be everybody, probably in the generation right after mine, if not this very generation, I may be alive when this happens. It won't happen this summer, but it might begin to happen this winter, when the Great Depression hits, the worldwide depression, which cannot be avoided. That's the first rider of the apocalypse. Actually, the horse. The first horse of the four horsemen is, I believe, it's famine. You may want to check that. Well, that's going to be next on the world agenda, is a worldwide famine. It'll begin when you can no longer buy gasoline at the pumps because it'll cost too much. That won't be this summer. This war is going to be dragged out as long as necessary to bring about the world depression, at which time Armageddon will be prepared. And that will involve the destruction of Israel, I believe, with nuclear weapons. Because as I began to say in the book of Ezekiel, in the valley of dry bones, you may want to read that, but I'll summarize it for you. The whole land of Israel is filled with dry bones, which men, after it's all over, will range through and mark those bones with tags. I say because they're radioactive. And it'll be 7 years, according to Ezekiel's prophecy, 7 years to just get all those bones in one place. That's Israel. That's all that will be left of Israel is bones. That's the valley of dry bones. So the book of Ezekiel outlines the war which involves Gog and Magog, which is a very interesting set of terms. Only occurs a few times, but Islam is aware of Gog and Magog. One of them is fairly obviously Russia, but the other one is quite mysterious and nobody knows which is which, but Russia is in there somewhere. Russia is being attacked by NATO. I don't know if you knew that. It's been under attack for decades, and now its airspace has been violated, just as Iranian airspace was violated, and now it's all-out war and nothing can prevent it. Nothing could stop this world war. It will be the first world war. But of course, the major initial scene of conflict will be Israel, which is going to be wiped out. It has to be. But that's going to initiate a series of events instantly, which will drive men out of their minds. They will want to die and not be able to. It will be Judgment Day that's going to begin with the most horrendous series of worldwide cataclysms ever recorded since the ecocidal flood just a few thousand years ago. 6,000 years ago is estimated was the flood. That's been proved by science, by the way, and that's all we have time for because that's an hour. I hope I've given you a sufficient introduction for my commentary to follow in another video, likely tomorrow, which will give you the full explication of what's going on Earth. It's the attack of Satan against the Christians. The Christians are the Islam people, they're the good guys, and the white race, the white nations, Israel, everything in Europe, and of course America, are the beast. But Israel has a special role. They're the whore. They're the whore. What a perfect name for that ridiculous nation. It's not ridiculous. They're going to kill everybody if they get a chance. And now they have the entire power of the United States on their side. Who coordinates this? Satan does. And God is going to give Satan full scope so that everybody will know what it's like to go up against the Lord of hosts. And that's true religion. And if you don't know that as an Islam person, it's because your leaders are blind. I'm not. Stay tuned. Keep looking up. I don't believe you're going to see a moon tonight, but every time you look up at the starry sky, that's the best time you're spending on Earth. Everything up in the sky is a sign of Allah. The moon itself can convert a human soul. Thank you for tuning in and for your patience. This must be very challenging. It's going to get much more challenging, but in real time. Existential threat to the human race. We'll be right back. Thank you very much.